Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking something absolutely critical in the world of advanced medicine. We're looking at cell and gene therapies, or CGTs. Now, these therapies are completely revolutionary, but translating all their complex analytical requirements into a dynamic strategy to actually prove they're safe and effective? Honestly, that is a massive challenge. You just can't rely on traditional pharmaceutical methods here. It's a whole different ballgame. So today we're going to break down exactly how to build an integrated, phase-appropriate analytical strategy, specifically zeroing in on characterization and potency assurance.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our clear roadmap for today. We'll start off with the analytical lifecycle, then look at our core testing attributes. After that, we'll tackle the massive logistical headaches of CGTs by diving into the physical constraint, followed by the biological constraint. Finally, we'll wrap the whole thing up with the matrix approach to multifaceted potency assurance.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the analytical lifecycle.
When we talk about analytical strategy in cell and gene therapy, we really have to shift our mindset. We aren't just ticking boxes on some generic compliance checklist here. Analytical methods exist to answer very specific quality questions about the product, like what is it? Is it pure? Is it safe? Does it actually work? And to answer those questions throughout development, our methods have to evolve. Now, there's a persistent myth out there that using a fit-for-purpose method in early development is basically the Wild West. That it means unvalidated or totally uncontrolled. Actually, scratch that. That is absolutely not true. Fit-for-purpose simply means the method is shown to be suitable for its intended use at that specific current stage of development. It still requires solid, documented justification. Then, as your product approaches those big, pivotal clinical trials and commercial stages, that method deliberately matures into a fully validated state. You plan this evolution. You don't just react to it method by method.
Moving right along to Section 2, core testing attributes. We're setting the baseline here.
And this brilliantly illustrates the foundation of what we absolutely must test before getting to the really tricky stuff. First up, identity. We have to confirm the product is the exact intended cell type or vector and not some random contaminating entity. Second, viability. What proportion of these cells are actually live and functionally intact? And third, cell count. Do we actually have dose-relevant cell numbers that meet our specs? Essentially, we're proving what the product is, if it's alive, and if we've got enough of it to actually treat the patient.
Beyond those basics, we have a really rigorous safety and purity panel. For purity testing, we're looking for non-target cell populations while also screening for residual process-related impurities, basically the stuff left over from manufacturing. Then we have our core microbiological safety checks, sterility, endotoxin, and mycoplasma testing. And finally, we screen for adventitious agents. These are unexpected viruses or pathogens, and we screen for them based on the specific risks of where we sourced our raw materials. Keep in mind, residual process impurities and microbial safety, they each require their own distinct, highly controlled strategies.
Which brings us to Section 3, the physical constraint. And honestly, this is where things start getting really intense.
Here's where the reality of cutting-edge therapies hits a massive, literal roadblock. I want you to really think about this question for a second. How do you test a product when you barely have enough for the patient? This is a constant constraint with autologous therapies where we use the patient's own cells and other small batch products. You have incredibly limited material to work with. Every single drop you use for a sterility or identity test is a drop that patient doesn't get.
Let's ground this abstract concept in reality with a fictional but very realistic case study from our source material, Asteria Advanced Therapeutics. So Asteria is developing this gene-edited T-cell product. It has a super short shelf life and yields very, very limited final material for release testing. They simply do not have the volume to run every single traditional release assay on the final product before it literally needs to go back into the patient. They're forced to make some major trade-offs.
So, what's the game plan here? Well, first, you must prioritize the absolutely essential safety and quality information within the tiny volume you do have. Second, you look at miniaturized or combined assays, assuming, of course, you can scientifically justify that they preserve the essential information. And third, you look at shifting feasible tests upstream to in-process measurements or finding orthogonal alternatives that don't eat up the final product volume. The main takeaway? Sample volume planning has got to be built into your process development early on. You really have to weigh the risk trade-offs when reducing traditional testing volumes. It absolutely cannot be a late-stage surprise.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 4, the biological constraint, specifically focusing on potency.
Okay, so we've talked about the physical volume constraints. Now let's talk about biological complexity.
Proving a living cell's potency is essentially proving that the product has the specific ability to achieve its intended clinical effect. But here is the stark reality of modern drug development. Rapid clinical timelines create completely legitimate pressure to mature these complex potency assays much faster than is practically ideal. You're moving fast to save lives, right? And that means your lot-release potency assay might not be fully mature during early clinical development.
So, how do we handle this pressure? Let me just bust another myth right here. An immature potency assay does not mean you can just skip testing or swap in a simple identity assay instead. No way. You can never omit potency assurance. Instead, you have to use interim, scientifically justified approaches based on the absolute best available data you have. You've got to draft a documented lifecycle improvement plan with clearly defined milestones showing exactly how the assay will mature over time. And crucially, you have to communicate the status and your plans transparently to regulatory agencies.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, Multifaceted Potency Assurance, the big solution.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it solves these complex biological roadblocks. How do we actually guarantee potency when a single assay might be immature or just inherently limited by the complex nature of a living cell? We use orthogonal methods. Orthogonal methods provide independent, complementary evidence about a quality attribute, but they use a completely different mechanism to measure it. They are vital when a single primary method has known limitations. Think of it like this. If one test has a blind spot, the orthogonal test covers it from a totally different angle.
Because of all this complexity, modern CGT relies on what we call a potency assurance matrix. It's a whole web. It starts with a really clear articulation of the product's mechanism of action. From there, your process design choices, like your specific cell activation conditions, are actually part of ensuring potency. Then you use early in-process measurements, which give you early warning signals of drift long before you ever get to final release testing. Finally, you combine your lot-release potency assay with those orthogonal methods we just talked about.
So the crucial point is this. Potency assurance is a strategy. It is not a single assay. It spans from your initial process design all the way through to your release testing and orthogonal matrices. The combination of all these elements working together is what guarantees your product will actually work for the patient. And where does all the data for this overarching strategy come from? Characterization. Characterization is the deep dive into what the cells or vectors actually are and what they do. We're talking phenotype and functional characterization, genetic integrity assessments to confirm your intended edits, and analyzing the heterogeneity of your cells. For vector products, it includes vector genome and capsid characterization. This incredibly deep data feeds directly into identifying your critical quality attributes, and it's what justifies your entire control strategy. Okay, let's do a quick recap of our journey today. We've seen that analytical methods don't just happen. They must evolve deliberately from fit for purpose to fully validated via a lifecycle strategy. We know our core panels must rigorously verify identity, purity, and safety. We've learned that the severe physical volume constraints of small batch products demand early, smart assay prioritization. And finally, we've seen that guaranteeing a biological product works. Its potency requires a dynamic, multifaceted matrix approach rather than relying on just one single test.
To wrap things up, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to reflect on for your own work. As your understanding of your specific manufacturing process matures, how will your potency assurance strategy evolve to meet commercial demands? Remember, lifecycle improvement means your CMC strategy has to keep maturing even after initial clinical use. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this gives you a much clearer lens on the incredible analytical strategies behind modern cell and gene therapies.